Well, the haters gonna hate, 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 and the fakers gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna making luck, a Dominion podcast.
Welcome to Making Luck, a comeuppance podcast.
Yeah, we pay our dues, and when we're wrong, we look ourselves in the mirror and we say, all right, gotta own up to this. Also, no one will ever love you. But,
pretty much.
Yeah, so...
we talk about Dominion.
Yeah,
It's
this is about a card game. Right.
Hope you like that.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is...
card games or Dominion?
Either one.
Okay.
If you don't know what both of those things are, you... I don't know, maybe you'll still enjoy the podcast. If you're listening to this and you don't know what Dominion is or a card game is... leave a comment in the comments section.
Yeah, or a comment is. But yeah, so like, I mean, you'd have to probably, either one, right? You could know what either one is.
Yeah, it's hard to know what Dominion is without knowing what a card game is, though.
Yeah, right.
But maybe if you do, leave a comment in the comment section. So I had someone, a friend from college, make a Facebook status, say, hey, I'm looking for new podcasts. Anyone have suggestions? Cool. And I suggested some real stuff, and I was like, I guess I could tell you about my podcast, too.
Yeah.
But I knew she's never heard of Dominion before. So I didn't even link it. And she's like, oh, wow, you have a podcast? Let me listen to it. I'm like, all right, here's the link, but I don't think this is going to be your thing.
Can you imagine somebody who doesn't play Dominion trying to stomach this? I've had the same thing where people will people who like me, believe it or not, will want to listen to the podcast and listen, if you keep pursuing this, I'm not going to keep telling you no, but don't say I didn't warn you. Yeah.
I mean, I have no delusions of, doing anything other than having fun with the podcast, right?
Right, totally.
We're not going to go pro. We're not going to get a Patreon. We're not going to be sponsored by Squarespace or whatever. Screw you, Squarespace.
Yeah, or the Oreo candy bars, apparently, which I've been...
Yeah, I saw those in a Target once.
I had my eye on that sponsorship for a long time.
Yeah. Come on, Oreo. Give us a call. Leave a comment in the comments section.
We have sold so many of your candy bars because I've bought them.
You're welcome.
But, yeah. All right. So, last episode, I wasn't on it.
Yeah.
But they talked about some stuff. What did you guys talk about again?
Oh, it was Wedding and Skulk.
Nice. Yeah. So
we talked about that stuff. And
yeah.
Then we did have a kingdom. Before we get to it, I just wanted to say one thing.
Yeah, sure.
We've had a lot of questions for our Q&A episode idea. We actually have more than enough to do one episode. So it's in the works. A Q&A episode is coming. If all goes well, that's next episode, but we'll see if things come together by then. So I don't want to promise that.
It will be happening.
Yeah.
Within the next few episodes.
A couple of things to say. If you sent in a question, thank you. We appreciate it. It is on our list, and we'll probably get to it one day. We have way too many questions from way too many people to address all of that in one episode.
Although keep asking them because the more questions we get, the better the episode's going to be because we'll be picking from better questions, right?
Right.
So,
and also if you guys like hearing it, we'll want to get your feedback. There'll be more Q&A episodes, and we'll be taking from that same pool of questions. Yeah. So keep giving us the feedback. It's been really great, and I'm really excited to do the Q&A episode, and it'll be coming soon. Keep doing that, and let us know today.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this kingdom.
Yeah. Okay. So this kingdom had both Wedding and Skulk, which is fine because they don't really mean a whole lot to each other, right? Sure. It's not like the kingdom is way different because both are in it. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess I can read it. Yeah.
Go for it, man.
All right. So this one has City Quarter, Poorhouse, Candlestick Maker, Encampment, Amulet, Watchtower, Skulk, Taxman, Recruiter, Replace. It also has Wedding and Fleet. Once more for our audio-only listeners, we have City Quarter, Poorhouse, Candlestick Maker, Encampment, and by the way, under the encampments are the plunders, as always. Then we have Amulet, Watchtower, Skulk, Taxman, Recruiter, Replace, Wedding, and Fleet.
All right, so last time, Wandering Winter and I disagreed on a couple of things here, And I think, Jake, when you listened to the episode and looked at the kingdom, you came down pretty close to what Wandering Winder was advocating for.
And
right?
I want to be very clear that my analysis of the kingdom actually came before I listened to what either of you said about it.
I gave him the kingdom. I put it in the channel, and he looked at it and said stuff before he ever listened to Wandering Winder.
And then I listened to it, and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what we said the same thing.
Yeah.
And that thing was that you are... we were kind of not waffling on whether or not you open with an amulet, but I said that you...
Wandering Winder said no amulet opening, but the goal was to hit 5 to get a recruiter.
Yeah, and then thin with that, and then, I don't know, did he ever say he was getting an amulet?
Yeah, so he said that he wanted to open with the objective of hitting 5. So like on a 4-3, you open Wedding, because it's really great to help you get Recruiter and Amulet on the next shuffle. The goal of the next shuffle is Recruiter and Amulet. And so like it could be Silver Watchtower or Double Silver. I think those were the things that he was talking about.
Sure.
But in any case, you get a Recruiter and an Amulet, then you start thinning and maybe getting some encampments. I actually did play a couple games with Wandering Winder. Didn't record them because I just wasn't in a place to do that. I had the baby and everything, and wouldn't have been good watching.
Yeah.
I advocated for something very different. But did you have anything else to say about that deck?
No, that was about it. And the idea was that you transition into the mid game of once you've been thinning with the recruiters. Maybe you're playing Watchtowers, maybe not. I think you probably are. And
I think that deck wants a Watchtower, maybe 2.
Yeah, the goal is to then be contesting encampments and plunders and doing the encampment plunder thing, and then eventually starting to replace golds into provinces and buy provinces, and that's the gist of the deck.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and then
so I advocated for something very different. I think on anything but a 5-2 or a 2-5, you open Amulet. I said I wanted at least one Amulet and was waffling on the second. I came down after that pretty firmly on the double Amulet opening. So I open double Amulet. I get encampments on turn 3 and turn 4, and then try and get my estates out. And then I try and hit 4 so I can put a Skulk in the deck.
And the idea behind the 2 amulets is that it is not helping you hit 5 very quickly, but it is helping you thin very quickly, because you've got the 2 duration thinners.
Getting thin is really important, and the reason why I wanted the second amulet was just to maximize the chances that I see one on turn 3 and that I don't have a miss in my shuffle. Like I really want to prioritize very heavily getting very thin, because the sources of draw here, City Quarter and Encampment, really want you to be thin.
Well, and not just that, but also I think like a little bit of a more subtle reason that you really want to get thin is because, like you guys mentioned in the episode, once you are drawing your deck comfortably, Skulk becomes a pretty fantastic card, because you spend $4 and you get a buy and an attack and a gold. And so that's a good reason to get thin too, so that you can make that happen.
Yeah, so there's some really good synergy here between Skulk and Encampment.
Right.
You can do this build where you thin aggressively, and you're going to have a lot of $2 hands. You put encampments in the deck.
And Encampment really wants plus buy, because it's cheap.
Yeah, it helps, yeah. I mean, if you're not feeling a lot of pressure on encampments, the Skulks plus buy can help you get there. Yep. But really, the big thing is, you have these encampments, and I found myself not playing them very much if I didn't have a gold in hand.
Well, because you didn't need to hit... You didn't need to hit price points.
Yeah, all
2.
I had to hit was 4 to get
2.
a Skulk. Well, yeah, I was hitting 2 anyway, but like, with all these encampments in my deck that I didn't feel the need to play, I was still okay, because all I had to do was put together $4 for a Skulk. And then I have this gold, and now I can play my encampments, I can do all these cool things, put a replace in the deck, and then I can start going to town.
Okay, so I don't even think that the crux of the disagreement was with the amulets or anything, or how quickly you want to thin. I think it was, what do you do with your first 5, and how much of a priority is it?
Yeah. How much do you care about hitting it ASAP?
We were both saying Recruiter, first 5, no-brainer. You do it.
You prioritize hitting 5 quickly to get that Recruiter ASAP, right?
And you said yes, and you said not so quickly, and it's definitely replace, and the replace is better in like every way.
Yes.
Okay, so the replace is not better in literally every way, because
there was like one game I even got a Recruiter.
The Recruiter is drawing the cards right now and cycling to itself faster. But I will come out and say this now. Yeah, Adam was right about this board.
I nailed it.
Yeah.
I nailed it. Okay,
I don't know what to say. Like, I was so sure that that I was right, and also that Wandering Winter was right, but mostly me. And
mostly you.
Yeah. No, but like the yeah, no, and it's crazy. So like,
I think the Recruiter Kool-Aid got the best of a lot of people.
I feel like
for Recruiter's like generally overrated, and I think it manifested here. I'm
not gonna go that far. I still think Recruiter is not necessarily overrated. I think Recruiter is fantastic, and it's a good card. It's a bad situation for Recruiter here.
Yeah, it doesn't really have anything going for it. I think Recruiter, like, the cool thing it does best is it's a village. Because the villager tokens are really, really good, right?
Sure, draw 2, trash 1 is also a thing.
Like, I mean, that's good, but it costs 5. I mean,
but the thing is that the replace top decking the encampments, like...
Top decking whatever you need.
Yeah, so, like, you can top deck deck control cards, which are, like, usually the encampments, and, like, you're drawing the 2 next turn instead of this turn. And I was, like, thinking, like, normally with gainers, gaining control cards, that's not a very convincing argument for me to go for them early, because I'd rather have the control now. But the replace, I don't know, top decking it is a big deal, so...
Replace has a lot going for it here. The first thing is your terminal space isn't really super tight. Every time you're drawing cards, you're getting that village effect unless you're playing Watchtower for draw, which is not good. That's just not a good deck. Don't build that deck. It's bad. But every time you're doing that, you're getting another action to spend. So, like, Replace being terminal doesn't hurt you that much. The top deck manipulation that Replace gives you is extremely important for keeping encampments in your deck.
Yeah.
You know what's coming up. You know what you need. You top deck a thing. Your next turn is good. Replace is really good for that. And finally, it's the main payload of the deck. It's easy to gain golds here. You want to replace golds with provinces because you can junk your opponent. Getting junked is really annoying, so you want to go for that early and get them flooded with curses. You can mill province just to junk them. You can replace whatever into a state or duchy and junk them. All of that is a really big deal. Replace is fantastic here. And like Recruiter, I don't need a village. This other stuff is kind of okay, but like I'd rather have encampment for all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Amulet.
All of that is valid, and I don't know what to say except that I was way off on my read on this board, and I think there are some lessons to take from that. One of them being that just because really good players and also Jake are pretty sure about something doesn't mean it's objectively true. So, like, you know, always keep an open mind and, like, think, like, if somebody else is like pretty sure of something that you think is terrible, at least give it some thought, because it turned out to definitely be better than what I was trying to do on this board.
So there was one last thing I wanted to mention here. So the between Wedding and Skulk, right? Skulk was mostly what you wanted here.
Mostly
it had a lot going for it.
Mostly because the Skulk was actually a pretty okay card for the deck.
Yeah, like the plus buy is relevant.
The attack was pretty relevant.
The attack is very relevant, right?
I mean, it can do nothing, but like it doesn't have to do nothing.
Yeah, and as long as there are encampments in the pile, taking the debt from a wedding was just really prohibitive. Like, I didn't want to enter my next turn with any debt, because, you know, there's a really good chance I'm only hitting 2 or maybe 3, so going into the next turn with 1 or 2 debt can be not an encampment, and contesting those, getting those, and keeping them, you know, it's a big deal. So most of the time when I wanted a $4 gold, which I did a lot, I was getting the Skulk. Now, when the encampments are gone, there were a couple of times when I got that wedding, because the Skulk is a card that gets in between your encampments and your plunders, which sometimes you don't want. The plus buy is a little less good when the encampments are gone.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes you already have a Skulk in the deck, and maybe you don't want a second one,
Yeah, and especially because the only cheap thing is Candlestick Maker, which you'd also be only really getting for the plus buy.
Yeah, so, and it's fine to have like 1 or 2 of these stop card plus buy things, but you really don't want a ton of them. Yeah,
because they make... Really, what they do is make you buy more city quarters. And that's the...
It's expensive, man.
It's expensive, and it also means, like, the more... It makes you more prone to duds when you have a lot of powerful draw and a lot of stop cards. The more combinations of cards you could draw that just don't kick off. because you don't have a city quarter in your hand, or you draw it with a bunch of treasures or whatever.
Or victory cards.
Well, and the payload here is I mean, you said the main payload here is replace, and that's true to a degree, but the...
if you want to supplement that, though, you're looking at treasures.
Well, and also, yeah, I mean, even if you don't want to supplement it, like, the replace is needing treasures to be the payload.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
If you want to replace something into a province, you have two options, and neither of them are action cards.
Right, exactly. Wait, what's the other one?
Province.
Oh.
Yeah.
I
did that a lot.
Yeah, so... Oh, yeah. That's the other thing about getting thin really fast is eventually, if you take enough of a lead, you can start junking your opponent with replace and have it be good. Like, you can do it at any point, but it's actually good to do it once you're thin.
Yeah, like, let's say they got a bunch of plunders.
Yeah, not only does that slow them down from drawing their plunders, it also shortens the game, which lessens the impact of those plunders. So, yeah.
So, and then, like, the last nitpicky thing is you can replace and gain a skulk, and you can't do that with a wedding. Sometimes that mattered. Funny thing, if you gain a skulk with replace...
Oh, yeah, this was weird.
Yeah, so the client, it has the rule correct, right? It's giving you the right rules implementation. But the skulk doesn't go to the top of your deck. Because you gain the skulk, and then you gain the gold, and then replace wants to top deck your skulk at that point. But the gold covered it up, so it lost track. And so the skulk doesn't go on top. But a lot of the time, this is great. That's actually what you want in most of the situations where I was doing this. But I also want to point out that rule is f***ing stupid.
Yeah, okay, so, like, it's not like the client should do...
The client's doing the rule of the game properly. Yeah. I'm saying the rule of the game is f***ing stupid. Like, if I replace and I put a skulk, like, that's just going on top of my deck. It's not intuitive. And it's the same thing with, like...
It's technically correct, but it's also, like, really?
Yeah, like, just... I know it has to be consistent with a bunch of other stuff, but, like, if I do something similar with, like, Border Village or Death Carders, those cards that gain you stuff...
Yeah.
Then I expect it to work, and then it just randomly doesn't. And like, it really bones you when you summon it. Like, I want to summon my death card. No, you can't do that. Like, if I'm sitting at, like, a table with someone, and they want to summon a death card, am I really going to be that guy that's like, well, actually, when you gain the death card,
I mean,
you gain your ruins.
It depends, right? Because, like, if it's like a competitive event and these are people who have come in understanding what they think that interaction
then the TO should be responsible and never allow that situation to come up.
Right, the TO should probably design that out of their kingdom.
And that's a pain in the butt, let me tell you.
But the TO should probably just clarify for everybody sitting down before that happens, saying, like, by the way, if you summon a death card, this is what happens.
That is so easy to miss, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it keeps me up at night, man.
Yeah. Adam's always thinking about his next tournament.
I mean, I am. So,
that's actually not too far off, yeah.
Like, the wheels are in motion over 3 months ahead of when it happens. Like, I put a lot of work in. Anyway, that's enough about this kingdom.
So it was interesting. So this episode is on Ambassador.
It's gonna get real.
It's gonna get real. We're gonna get our fists all bloody because we have some disagreement.
We've promised that before, and it didn't work out. And I feel like we gotta... It can happen.
So... Okay.
I'm gonna beat the shit out of him, okay?
Our fists are gonna be covered in blood. So, I do want to clarify something, and that is that originally the Ambassador episode was gonna be combined with the episode we did on the role of junking, because Ambassador kind of illustrates the different functions that junking can have, because it does all of them and it can excel at all of them.
That includes, like, thinning your deck, too.
Right. But, like, aside from the thinning, right? So, like, the role of Ambassador's junking is really a good illustration of the different roles of junking, just depending on what else is in the board.
Yeah.
Of course, that episode ran long, and there's a lot of Ambassador content,
this one's gonna run long, too.
Yeah, so, like, that just wasn't gonna work out, but we're gonna be referencing it a good deal, and I do think that Ambassador is a really interesting thing to look at in Dominion, because it tells you a lot about what junking does and doesn't do.
Yeah, man. You want to read the card?
Yeah, so Ambassador is from the Seaside expansion. It is a 3-cost action attack. It says, reveal a card from your hand. Return up to 2 copies of it. Those are also from your hand. To the supply. Then each other player gains a copy of it. So you play it, you reveal a card, and then you can return up to 2 of that card to the supply. and everyone else gains 1 copy of it after you have returned.
Yeah, so a couple things. You can choose to reveal 0. So if I have an ambassador and I have a purple in my hand, play the ambassador, I reveal the purple. I don't have to return the purple.
Yeah, you can choose to return 0.
And they still gain the purples, even if I return 0. Okay.
And that's really more relevant if, like, you have a second ambassador in hand.
Yeah, so I can reveal the same purple to my second ambassador. And then maybe I want to return it the second time. Or maybe I don't.
Yeah, right. Yeah. These are just things that you're allowed to do.
Maybe I'll have a third. Raw. The other thing is, if you reveal something that isn't in the supply, then the rest of the card just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, you don't return it.
Yeah, the big example here is shelters.
Yes.
Right? The shelters are not in the supply. So if I reveal my overgrown estate, then it gets revealed, but then there's no supply for it to return to because that's not where it's from. And so it stays in my hand.
I actually always forget. Does it work on ruins?
Yeah, they're in the supply.
Okay.
So you can, they're differently named, right? So I can return 2 ruined libraries. And that's pretty cool.
Well, I was wondering if, like, there had to be a ruined library on top for you to reveal the first ruined library at all.
Oh, well, you can reveal it.
Yeah.
And if I reveal a ruined library, and let's say I choose not to return it, or I'm playing a 3-player game, and there's, like, a ruined market on top.
Sure.
Then if I return the ruined library, then the guy to my left gets it, and then if the next card happens to be ruined library, which it wasn't, then the third guy gets it.
Yeah.
But if not, then the third guy just gets off without any junk.
Yeah, so, like, there is rules weirdness, but it's pretty intuitive because you just have to read the card and do exactly what it says, and then, it's pretty clear what's supposed to happen. Just read the card and follow it to the letter, and you'll know how to resolve Ambassador.
Yeah, and just remember it doesn't work with things not in the supply, and then there's really no weirdness. Like, it just means don't reveal that because it doesn't do anything. And that's really what you need to remember.
Unless you just want to show your opponent you have it.
Yeah.
Mechanically, with Ambassador.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to just show them. But yeah. Anyway, so...
With possession.
Yeah.
Possession, though, you're not trashed. The cards aren't trashed. So they go back to the supply. So if I possess you and you have an ambassador and you reveal a province, you return it, I get the province. And that province is gone.
Yeah, it's really weird.
That's brutal.
It's also the only thing in the game that has you putting cards back in the supply that you've gained. Other than cards that are like have that built into them.
Yeah,
effect.
like the spoils isn't in the supply.
Experiments, whatever.
Yeah.
So like other than that, like this is the only thinning in the game that actually puts things back in the supply, and that's really significant for the attack part.
Yeah, because
it never runs out of ammo.
Yeah, it could potentially never run out of ammo.
Yeah.
So before we get into this, I'm gonna point out there's going to be a link in the description in the show notes to an article that Wandering Winder wrote about Ambassador.
Oh yeah, he wrote that like forever ago too.
Yeah, it's like 7 years ago.
Yeah, I wasn't even born yet.
It says right at the top of it, it says that he doesn't think the article will stand the test of time. But here we are. It's 2019. It is still one of the best articles about Dominion I've ever read. It does stand up to the test of time. Read it.
It's a pretty influential one too because I think it's like programmed in a lot of people's play with Ambassador. We're gonna get to that because I think for the most part, the article is excellent and it taught a lot of people what you should do with Ambassador. But it also taught some people some things that you maybe shouldn't do with Ambassador because they do them all the time, even when they shouldn't do them.
Oh boy! Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So.
So you were saying before I interrupted you. Yeah.
No. I mean, obviously the article is excellent, and part of the reason it's so important is that Ambassador is an extremely powerful card.
Real good. 10 out of 10, man.
I remember when I was first just learning Dominion, I was getting into the game, and I asked you. We were IRL, and I asked you to give me a list of cards, or take cards out of your box and show me cards that I can never get away with ignoring. Show me cards that I need to always at least be thinking about and probably playing around. And you got out, Page and Goons and King's Court.
All the 10 out of 10s for my rating.
Yeah.
That's what a 10 out of 10 is to me, really.
Yeah, and it was a short list, and Ambassador was out there too. He talked about Ambassador as well. So that's the scope of how powerful this card is.
Real good. You need a really good reason to consider ignoring this card. It's rare that it happens.
It is rare. Now, What exactly makes it so good?
So, it trashes. Well, it doesn't. It thins your deck.
Right. It takes cards that you don't want out of your deck,
and it also junks. And these two things are just two of the most powerful things you can do. And notably, they are the two most important things to you at the start of the game. And you can open with this card.
Right. And not only can you open with this card, you can open with this card 2 times. Yeah. You can open with 2 of this card usually. So
that's like 55 times.
Yeah, so what is the Ambassador doing? It is thinning, and like this Ambassador really kind of gets at the heart of what I mean when I say that time is measured in shuffles. So Ambassador thins 2 cards per shuffle, and it junks 1 card per shuffle. That's what it's doing. So the idea is that both players are probably opening with an Ambassador. They're at least getting it quite early, and you are thinning cards with it and giving your opponent junk, so you're speeding yourself up, but you're also getting slowed down by their Ambassadors. And these cards that junk X number of times per shuffle, or these cards that thin a certain number of times per shuffle, they cause you to shuffle faster because you're thinner. And so they cause you to thin faster because you've been thinning faster. And that causes a certain velocity to build up. And at a certain point, you're going to draw your deck really quickly. And then
at the same time, you're also causing the opposite thing for your opponent because you're junking them.
Exactly. So you're getting the fact that we have... we've talked about kingdoms before that have both thinning resources and they have junking resources. And we've talked about this sort of teeter-totter effect. Where
like which one do you want to get first, or are you gonna go for
and like the player who gets control of their deck because of this dynamic, again, they have that velocity because they're thinning faster. The other player, like Adam just mentioned, is thinning slower because they've been thinning slower, and they're junking slower, and they're not slowing down the opponent, and there's just this like haves and have-nots situation.
So just so we're clear, Jake used the teeter-totter analogy. But I don't know, I mean, maybe he doesn't look at the thumbnails of the episode. I used some very, very muscular men.
Right, muscular dudes on a teeter-totter. Yeah.
There was no teeter-totter in the thumbnail.
Man, I can imagine whatever I want. All right, okay. So
whatever makes you happy, Jake.
Yeah. So, and we've talked about that situation and that dynamic being dominant whenever the thinning and the junking are, like, anywhere close to each other in power and they're both available. So Ambassador is really significant on every board because it's one card that does both of the things. It, by itself, is bringing that dynamic into the game. It doesn't need any other cards around it to do that. It's just bringing that situation that we talked about with it.
So it not only is it doing that, it's actually doing it in a more, just doing it more, right? Because let's say there's a junker, and you can trash the junks, but eventually, let's say it gives out curses.
Yeah,
the curses will eventually run out.
Yeah,
and then the junker doesn't do that anymore, and then the junks get trashed, and we move on with our life.
Yeah,
that is not the case with Ambassador necessarily, and in fact, usually a lot of times. There's an effectively endless supply of junks that you can hand out to your opponent, and so there's that effect where I play this card, I thin my deck, that helps me, I junk them, that hurts them, and so if that continues happening, eventually one player could get an advantage this way, but that advantage could just never stop.
Yeah.
By never, I mean it goes on as long as the person wants to press that advantage.
Yeah, the advantage can also never happen. That's possible too. So like,
sure, if Ambassador thins 2 cards and it only junks 1.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You may have heard the term the Ambassador War, right?
Yeah, or some people they used to call it tennis, but I don't think. I mean.
Well, tennis is a fine way to look at it. So is the war, right? It's just this state where you're flinging junk at each other, and you're both in like sort of a relatively even state of deck control, and you're not really gaining any ground on deck control. You're not really losing any because you're getting junked and you're thinning. But
I was gonna say because like a lot of the tennis players, when the racket hits the ball, they when they shout, they do that so their opponent can't hear the sound it makes. And so when I play my Ambassador, I'm usually... Yeah, that's why they do it.
That's amazing.
And that's why it's banned in some places. Cause, yeah, that's why they do it.
That's crazy. Okay.
In any case, but when I play an ambassador,
you shout so that the opponent...
I smack it down on the table really hard, and then I also shout so they can't hear the noise.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So, yeah, I mean, like, this sort of, like, tug-of-war for deck control on ambassador, it never has to gain any ground because, like Adam just mentioned, it's thinning in a vacuum. It's thinning faster than it's junking. You would think that eventually... Despite Ambassador junking me, I'm going to get control because I'm thinning 2 cards that are junking me 1. But the thing is that it can miss the shuffle at some point. You're shuffling cards, and eventually the junking the opponent is never making your deck any thinner for doing it. So, like...
Yeah, like, the way I would put it in maybe nerdier terms...
Sure.
Is, like, there's this equilibrium point where, let's say both players have control over their deck. Then they can fling one junk back and forth at each other, but they both have enough control over their deck that they can take care of any incoming junk on their turn, and then their opponent can also do the same. So neither one of them necessarily has to lose control of their deck. And until maybe one of them greens or, loses control of their deck for some other way, that equilibrium point holds where the fact that Ambassador can thin more than it junks is the dynamic that we have here.
Yeah, that's in addition to being nerdier, that also made sense, which what I was saying didn't. So, yeah.
Oh, well, it did make sense, but you didn't use the word equilibrium point.
Ooh.
And there are other equilibrium points that happen. And another one of those equilibrium points, it's kind of an equilibrium, at least for one player, is one player gets snowballed. So that means one player has control over their deck, and the other one doesn't. And the player that doesn't have control over their deck is getting junked so much that it's harder for them to see their ambassadors enough to even play one a turn.
So we would call that, we come back to the ambassador war, where I'm going to use some terminology of winning and losing. I'm not talking about the game, I'm talking about the ambassador war. Winning the ambassador war would be a state where this has become impossible to happen to you because you've gotten like complete control of your deck. And losing the ambassador war would be this situation that Adam just described, where you got snowballed, and the junk is coming in faster than you can deal with it because you're not seeing your ambassador enough because you've been junked. Neither of those have to happen to either player. Both of those can happen to both players in any given game.
But that's like what the resolution to the Ambassador War looks like.
Yeah, and like the term isn't important. The only reason I stress it is because I'm going to be using it to talk about other things. Like, and when I say nobody has to lose the Ambassador War, like that's what I mean. That doesn't have to happen to either player, but it can happen to both.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So,
I mean, a lot of times I don't want to lose this thing. I want to have control over my deck.
Exactly.
And in most cases, I mean, I have to think really hard and stretch really hard to come up with a case where I am okay losing the Ambassador War.
Yeah, there has to be, like, you have to basically not care what cards you draw on your turn.
Yeah, so, I'm thinking Beggar Gardens.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one. Or I'm thinking maybe I have Salt the Earth, and I can close the game out that way.
Okay.
And, like, past that, and even those are both sketchy examples.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Beggar Garden's less sketchy, because that one's, like, enough that, like...
Beggar Gardens is, like, a combo.
Yeah, and it's, like, it's a combo that doesn't care about what cards it draws.
It wants cards.
Yeah, right. So, like, the Salt the Earth one, we were talking about this earlier. I don't necessarily agree that one pushes me away from Ambassador. But
well, it makes me a lot more okay with losing the war. We're not bickering yet.
Yeah, it certainly makes me like want to front run. Yeah. So and the Ambassador doesn't help you do that. But we talked about what happens where what happens to like cause this tipping point where you start to lose control. You talked about this point where both players have at least relative control of their decks, where they're dealing with the junk, but then one player's ambassador misses the shuffle or something like that. So they have to go a turn without playing their ambassador.
Okay, so if I have control over my deck, then missing the shuffle isn't usually what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking like I had a dud and I didn't draw enough to play my ambassador and effectively return the junks I wanted to return.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of weird. We're kind of using the word control differently, right?
But when I say have control over your deck, that means I'm drawing my whole deck.
Okay.
Every turn.
Sure.
And in fact, like, side commentary here, when most people say engine, that's what they really mean. They won't tell you that because they I don't know, they're not as smart as I am. I don't know, but like that's what they mean. Yeah. And that's the instructive point. And that matters here. If you're drawing your deck, that means whatever junks you got on your last turn that are in your discard pile, you need to get back to those junks on this turn. Still have your ambassador, but play your ambassador and get rid of the junks. Like that's the kind of control over my deck I'm talking about. I want to be overdrawing.
So some player has a dud, and all of a sudden they
couldn't deal with those junks.
Those junks are there now, and now
they're getting more.
Right, and so unless they were overdrawing by a lot, and they just had a freak dud, unless they were overdrawing by enough that like they can compensate for these new junks, that dud is probably happening again next turn, because now
it's more likely.
The situation that whatever caused the dud in the first place probably didn't stop happening.
It's only going to get worse because you're getting more and more junks.
Yeah, and that's how it accumulates, and that's how Ambassador snowballs, even though it thins more cards than it junks.
So in physics terms, this is an unstable equilibrium. It's like there's a mountain, and then there's a ball at the top of the mountain, and there's one point on the tip of the mountain where the ball can be at rest. But that doesn't work because if someone farts on the other side of the world, like, sorry, I said fart and it was funny, then that ball's coming down.
That's actually a really good example, and this is a good example of
why math is important, and you should all learn calculus.
Yeah, so... Anyway. So, we've got that dynamic. We've got the fact that this tug-of-war thing is built into Ambassador, and that the tug-of-war dynamic is maybe really distilled with Ambassador because it's that one card and that's all it's doing.
Yeah, it's all baked into the one card.
Yeah, it's not like we're talking about the difference between, like you've got Junk Dealer and Familiar or whatever, and there's other stuff you're talking about, too. It's like the Ambassador, that's all it's doing, so we can really isolate this dynamic that's happening. And you see the same thing happening in other kingdoms with junking and trashing. It's just really easy to talk about with Ambassador.
For sure.
That's not the only thing that makes the Ambassador War unique.
Yeah.
And you alluded to it earlier.
Yeah.
It's that most sources of junk, the junk like runs out, like, and eventually there's a cap on what the junk can do. Yeah. And you can look at the junking and say like, okay, well, I have enough resources here that I can either contest the junking a little bit and not have to deal with so much of it, or I can just deal with the junk I'm getting. But like with Ambassador, you have to understand that the junk is theoretically boundless, right? They can always find something else to give you. As long as there are cards in the supply, those cards could end up in your deck at some point, somehow, some way.
Yeah, by them playing Ambassador.
Yeah, so
that's the main way.
It's like you're playing tennis, and a normal game with the junking is like one player eventually runs out of balls and calls Uno. But in the Ambassador game...
That happened last time I played tennis.
Yeah, in the Ambassador War, when you run out of balls and call Uno, the other player just gets another box of balls out of his backpack and throws them onto the grid, and he yells, checkmate. So
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, that's basically the Ambassador War in a nutshell.
Yeah, so that was a good podcast. Yeah. We don't need to explain anything else.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, so I think let's maybe try and... start talking about a little more practical things. Like we've covered a lot of the theoretical things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some practical applications, and I think one that applies to every game is the beginning of that game.
Yeah, totally.
At the beginning of the game, I do not have control over my deck.
No.
And that's bad. I want to get it, and I don't want to get snowballed. And so I have this card I can open with that really helps.
Yeah, and you do that.
You should do that. Yeah.
And
open with Ambassador. Do that.
So
if you don't open with even if you do open with Ambassador, you could get snowballed. You could try as hard as you can for the first infinity turns of the game to get control of your deck, and it might just never happen. It's that important.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say like 90% of the time that's absolutely true. Like I said at the beginning, there's some bickering between us here, but like I'm gonna say that that's usually true. That you open with the Ambassador, and a lot of the time you open with two Ambassadors. And what's the reason for that?
Well, you want to maximize the chances that you are playing your Ambassador as soon as possible and as often as possible.
Right.
So if I open with two Ambassadors, I'm shoring up the chance that my one ambassador misses that first shuffle.
Yeah. Right.
But also I'm giving myself the chance to high roll and play an ambassador on both turn 3 and turn 4.
Yeah, so at a certain point, and by the second shuffle, you can have played an ambassador every turn of the game if you get a high roll draw. And, like, obviously that's banking on luck, but we've said before that, good players tend to be the ones that give themselves chances to get lucky.
2's a good number of ambassadors to have, given the size of your deck at the start of the game, and especially considering that it's likely that your opponent will be giving you some junks with ambassador. Now, that said, a second ambassador is often not the best thing you can do in the opening.
Yeah, so, like, usually if there's something that's, like, not a stop card, so, like, obviously... Yeah, if there is... we've talked about the ambassador being important to get and to see as often as possible. If there's some way that you can maybe not get a second ambassador, because, they could collide and that's sad, but still have, something that's not getting in the way of the ambassador, like some kind of cantrip that's giving you some value. Yeah, that's a fine opener with your ambassador.
So at the top of the list is Caravan and Tournament.
At the top of my list is Scheme, because then it's like I have 2 ambassadors. Sort of. It's like got my... this doesn't really matter, but yeah.
The point of these other cantrips, though, is that Caravan is directly helping you by drawing you more cards, which Ambassador likes, helps you play more ambassadors. Tournament, or, any of those other 4-cost peddlers, really is just Poacher, right? Because the rest of them have issues, and they're...
Sure.
More than 4.
Yeah, Oasis you'd think would be good, but Ambassador actually wants a decently large hand size. Which, for reasons we'll get to.
Right. So having a chance to have some payload in your deck that is a cantrip is actually very helpful.
Yeah.
So it can help you buy things along with laser focus thinning down your deck. You can actually accomplish something.
Okay, so I really want to harp on that, and the idea of buying things.
Yeah.
I
love buying things.
This sounds like a pretty obvious point, but I think people forget that you need to do it in Ambassador games sometimes. Like, there are games that are the crux is the Ambassador War. That's all there is to this game, and we really need to get control, and the only things that are doing that are playing Ambassadors. But typically, there's some card in the kingdom that's going to help you in some way. And...
yeah,
you want to buy that card.
You should buy cards,
This
man.
is like John Madden commentary. You're going to have to buy cards if you want to win the game. But so the thing is that there is this protocol with Ambassador that is true for the most part.
And on turn 3 and turn 4.
I think it was like mostly fleshed out in that Wandering Winder article. That was like kind of the first time people had thought about it.
Yeah.
And that's... that when you play your ambassador, you always return 2 of something, no matter what that something is. It could be 2 estates, it could be 2 coppers. But if you draw the hand and you're looking at thinning 2 coppers or 1 estate, copper's a better card, but having 1 fewer stop card is a better effect for your deck.
So, like, the classic example is I draw ambassador, 3 coppers, and an estate. And I have options, right? I can return an estate, and I can even buy something that could help my deck. Yeah. But that's still not nearly as good as just chucking 2 coppers. Because...
well, and that depends, but usually yes.
I mean, if I care about the Ambassador War, which, I mean, I probably do because I open with an Ambassador, that's more than likely going to be what I want to do. And that has the same principle as, like, well, if I draw my chapel with a bunch of coppers on turn 3, well, you got to trash those coppers because that's going to help you line up your chapel with estates. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Ambassador. If you just chuck 1 estate back, well, what are you doing?
Your opponent, well, then, I'll tell you what you're doing. You chuck that 1 estate back, we're going to refer you to the first half of this episode, where you've thinned 1 fewer cards than your opponent, and now you've given them a window to start snowballing you, because they return 2 cards, they see their ambassador more often than you see yours. Yeah. We know where this is going. Yeah. Okay, so, oh, by the way, I'm going to take a pause here. When you ambassador... leads to really long games of Dominion.
This can go on for a minute.
Except it doesn't, because Ambassador leads to, like, when we look at whatever data we have, and this is pretty consistent, Ambassador leads to the most resigns. Of, like, because once that starts to happen, it's a long walk off a short cliff. Anyway...
so, like, you're taking these hands, you're returning the coppers. That means you're, like, usually not buying anything.
Yes.
And that sucks because Jake was just saying, remember John Madden Jake over here?
You're going to have to buy things eventually if you're going to want to win the game.
You need to buy cards.
Is that what John Madden sounds like?
Yeah, I thought I was sitting next to John Madden.
Yeah, right.
But then I looked over and it was you.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
And I mean, you are actually a lot more attractive than John Madden, which isn't saying much, but like you are attractive too.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I say that in a completely platonic way.
Right. Well,
I
am your kid from the future. We established that. But anyway, so the thing is that obviously we talked about you usually return the 2 coppers. It's obviously better if you can return the 2 estates early on.
Yeah, man.
Now, because then you have these estates out of your deck, your opponent has more of them. You've got the coppers, which help you buy things. Copper's a bad card, but at the beginning of the game, it's one of the best cards in your deck because it helps you buy things.
Better than estate.
Okay, so here's the thing. I have heard people argue that they're the same. Like, it's the same situation, that it doesn't matter. And whether you draw the 2 estates or the 2 coppers with your ambassador. And I want to tell you that is fake news. Because, like, the logic behind that is that they're both stop cards and they're both not helping you win the ambassador war. But I really want to, like, remember, you have to look at the rest of the kingdom. You have to usually buy things other than ambassadors. Returning cards with ambassador cannot be the only thing your deck is doing. Otherwise, you're going to lose.
You're going to lose to the guy who's able to play ambassador and also buy something. That helps them maintain control of their deck. Or worse, play multiple ambassadors every turn on you.
Yeah, and like, so your opponent puts those 2 estates back, and now he doesn't have them, and you do. Eventually, you're going to have the same thing, and it's going to even out, and you're going to give them estates. But here's the thing. Remember, estates don't help you buy things. Coppers do. And so in the meantime, they've been buying things. Those things could be like labs and caravans, things that help you play ambassadors, or payload that they just get ahead of you and start running laps around you because you had the estates then and you weren't putting good cards in your deck.
Or maybe these juicy cards cost 5, so they bought some payload that helps them hit 5, and now they're playing a ghost ship on you. And let me tell you, if your turn sucked after you played ambassador, it's gonna suck even more after you got hit by ghost ship and then you had to play an ambassador. You're just not doing anything ever again.
Okay, I don't usually like to fixate on these things that matter, but like you can't control, because like this is a situation where like I'm talking about you. Obviously, you're gonna thin the 2 coppers if you are choosing to do that instead of the estates, but like, you know, you draw the 2. Your opponent draws the ambassador into a state that says, "Yosel," and like, but like, you can't really control that. Why am I talking about it? It's because that dynamic, why the estates are bad, is also playing into one of the finer points of playing ambassador, and why I consider ambassador a fairly high skill card. And that is that at a certain point, you are actually wanting to return fewer coppers. And that's so that you can buy something. Because the coppers are a bad card, but remember that they do serve to get you good cards. To, like, help you play other things, like ambassadors.
Like, if my deck is nothing but an ambassador and, like, 2 coppers, I've got control of my deck. We did it, guys. But also, my deck doesn't do anything. And that's bad.
Right.
Also, by the way, if you see your opponent do that, don't return coppers.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do that. Just let them sit. Make them buy the copper of sadness.
Right. So, like, this idea that the estates and the coppers are not equal is also coming into this these considerations that you make when you're deciding which card to reveal and how many of it to return. And there are a few things that go into that. Adam alluded to one, which is how much payload is left in my whole deck.
At the very least, I mean, you need to be able to get a silver.
That's the baseline that I've gone by in the past, is never take away your deck's theoretical capability to acquire silver.
Yeah, like, I mean, there are exceptions, but that's a decent rule. You can get the silver, maybe chuck some coppers back, get another silver, and now, you know, you can keep your deck super thin and on top of it, but now you are increasing your payload. Because you've got these silvers, you are making a little bit more money on your turn. So you can buy these decent $4 or $5 cards. It could be deck control.
or some of the time you even like return 1 fewer copper than you would so that you can hit 3 and get that silver, because having the silver in your deck is freeing you up to thin more coppers later. Yeah. Because you can do that without taking away your deck's capability to get a silver.
Yeah, and now, you gotta do this eventually.
Right? Asterisk to that, your opponent's probably going to be sending you coppers too, so like bear that in mind. But like they might not. They might send you estates instead, so like you can't rely on that.
Yeah, like I mean, this is a little bit of a moment of weakness, right? If you're not thinning as much as you possibly can, then if you get snowballed as a result of that, which is still a possibility. You know, you're going to look back at that point and say, maybe I didn't have good enough control of my deck. Maybe I needed to thin even more before I went for this moment of weakness.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something that can happen to you.
There is kind of, like, I don't want to say this because it sounds, like, unhelpful, but there's a certain point with Ambassador games where you kind of do it by feel.
I mean, that's a lot of Dominion, yeah.
Yeah, where you kind of just, like, be like, all right, I've been in this situation before, and I think this is what happens next.
I actually had a little bit in my outline about this situation, but like it was already super long. I mean, look how far into the episode we are. We still have some stuff to talk about, and like,
right.
So I had to cut scope, and like there it is. It's really tough to talk about, but
well,
like, that will come with experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but there.
But
it is.
Yeah, there's like the fact that we both said this independently is kind of just have to get these under your belt.
It means we must be right.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Just like with Recruiter in that last. Anyway.
Yep.
So, yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier that tracking what's in your opponent's deck is pretty important, because you look at this moment where they've thinned too much, where they may have to buy a copper to get back in it, and you don't want to send them a copper. You had in your outline like a good thing to look for. Like, what's the tell for that?
Oh, if they start their turn and they've already drawn their deck.
Yeah.
You should probably think about what cards are in their hand.
Yeah, right. So, like, don't give them a copper that they were going to have to buy. Let them spend that turn. Yeah. They wouldn't help you.
Yeah.
They don't like you.
It's like Sue Hawk in season 1 of Survivor, that famous jury speech, the Rats and Snakes jury speech, where she's like, if you were dying in the desert, I wouldn't give you any water. By the way, after the game was over, she said that she would actually give Kelly water. I mean, she didn't really mean that. She was just really upset.
Yeah, totally.
So she said something that she regretted on national television. No bigs.
Yeah, it happens. We've all been there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. You wanted to talk about things that are like good for Ambassador, right?
So, you have this constant threat of junking and losing your deck control. Let's say you have some semblance of deck control. You know, there's normally when you draw your deck, you have this balance, like, oh, I want to have some balance of payload versus deck control. Enough deck control to continue drawing my deck, but then I want to add payload so I can do more stuff, right?
Yeah.
And Ambassador means that your priorities are shifted pretty drastically towards deck control. I want to be overdrawing my deck pretty consistently by many, many cards. By many, I mean like maybe 2 to 4 cards. Right. Somewhere around there, where maybe I would go for like not even quite drawing my deck to maybe overdrawing by 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's mostly to the extent that I want to keep deck control. I don't want to lose it because maybe I can just lose.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also another option, even in this situation, but I guess maybe you're also thinking about it. So it's a really flashy move where I have control over my deck, and I want to stick it to my opponent. Like, I've been handing them coppers, and you know, handing them coppers is just great. They're stop cards. They prevent the opponent from playing more ambassadors, right? And maybe I don't have estates to pass them, but I just feel like that's not enough pain for them.
Right.
So I'm going to buy a curse, and I'm going to reveal the curse, and I'm going to send them all the curses.
The curse trick. You buy 1 curse, and they get 10 as a result. That is not a thing you never do, but I do think people do it way, way, way too often.
Yes.
It's kind of, most of the time, it's like a win more lever. It's like if you were already winning. It's
a win less lever most of the time. Seriously,
so, yeah,
it's very infrequently worth it. Like, remember when we talked about Defiled Shrine? If you're giving up your entire buy to get this curse, that's really, really bad.
Right.
But also, like, the junks you're already giving them, as long as they're stop cards and they're not, like, silver, because that's a good card, then it's mostly fulfilling the same purpose.
So when is the curse trick good? It's usually when the opponent has elected to either ignore Ambassador or do something that will go lighter on Ambassador than you and try to front run a little bit with payload and getting ahead. You can use that to slow them down a little bit and make up a little bit of a points deficit.
Yeah, I think that's the main use case, is the points.
It's a marginal tactic, though. Please don't do this very often. It is occasionally good, but it's pretty rare and it needs a lot of justification, and you really need to be desperate to slow your opponent down and decrease their point ceiling a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that the points is the main thing that I'm concerned
usually
with
here.
Yeah.
And the big deal that you mentioned is that it takes up your whole turn to do it. So it follows that Ambassador is good with plus buy, right? So you can so that maybe you can buy junk, even whether it's a curse or not.
Well, the curse trick certainly is a lot better with the plus buy.
Yeah, but even without the curse thing, maybe you just buy some piece of junk that maybe it's copper even, so that you can have the copper and spend it and still give them one or whatever.
Sure, I mean whatever makes you happy, man.
The other idea is that plus buy is incentive to build more anyway.
Right. I mean, if I have drawn my deck, I would sure like for there to be a reason to do so.
Yeah.
So plus buy helps a lot there, but also playing attacks is something that helps me along that line anyway. Other synergies I'm looking for. So some way to play more than one Ambassador in a turn is a good way to shut your opponent down pretty hard.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm looking for. Draw cards.
Which means a village, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Most villages will allow you to play more than one Ambassador in a turn.
Well, the other thing about village is that, like, sometimes it's more than one Ambassador in a turn, but sometimes it's also just that the win condition for the board involves playing some other terminal. And so, you want to keep playing your Ambassador, but you have this other terminal, but you don't want your whole turn to just be playing the Ambassador, so, like, having the village lets you play Ambassador plus do other stuff you need to do.
Mm. So yeah, I'm also looking at draw cards. That really helps you along the path of being able to play an Ambassador constructively, or maybe multiple, and then also being able to do something else, like maybe buy cards or have money or something like that. And then finally, I'm looking for some way to overcome a points deficit once I have won the Ambassador War. It makes me want to invest in that more. We talked about the curse trick, and that's kind of okay, but like that's really bad, and you would really like to have something better.
Yeah, I mean, Ambassador excels at slowing down the game, so you want to have some, like, if your opponent can go for the win condition of getting 50% VP or more, it doesn't matter how much you've slowed down the game eventually, because you can't win, right?
Rip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like, certain forms of payload that come with deck control components, so, cantrips that help you along with your payload. So, like, I talked about, PEDDLER, tournament, that sort of thing. But, the more expensive cards,
yeah,
like, that have both deck control and payload components,
yeah,
are pretty useful. Also, other attacks, especially deck control attacks. If there's a discard attack, then that really hurts to go along with the Ambassador.
I want to say that you say other deck control attacks, and I absolutely agree. The discard attacks, yes. But other junking attacks do not play nice with Ambassador.
Well, they have a pretty complicated relationship, yeah.
I would say it's pretty rare you want to go for any other junking if you're going for Ambassador. I almost never do it.
It's a slightly more efficient way of doing the curse trick,
I guess.
But really, if you go for
But it's a slightly more efficient way for your opponent to do the curse trick, too.
Well, it's a slightly more efficient way for your opponent to not actually thin their deck while they're junking you. Right? Yeah. If I buy a card that just gives you a curse, and you're buying an Ambassador, which thins and gives me bad cards, then really, where do you think all those curses are going to end up?
If denying my opponent deck control is what I need to do with my terminal action, there's a great card in the kingdom to help me do that.
Yeah? What is it, Jake?
I don't remember.
Okay, never mind. I would
it's
say...
Ambassador.
Oh,
anyway.
nice.
Yeah, so
like looters, the ones with the ruins. Ambassador doesn't
right.
like fighting those as much, but there's only 2 of them.
Yeah.
And Marauder just isn't nearly as good as Ambassador for that purpose. It seems like something you might do when you're already ahead, and then there's Cultist. But Cultist is Cultist. It's another 10 out of 10. And
Cultist is another kind of conversation entirely.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Cultist is dumb.
Yeah. I mean, I'll agree with you. I think, so this is not a Cultist episode, but I think Cultist is overrated, but also dumb and unfun.
Yep.
But
nice.
Okay, so, alright, so this is the part...
I'm ready to put the brass knuckles on, man.
Yeah, this is the part where the gloves come off, and we start talking about we've been purposely avoiding the topics where I know we're going to disagree.
Yeah.
Because we've been saving it.
We wanted you to have something productive to listen to before we start beating the ever-loving shit out of each other.
Okay. I don't think Adam and I... Notice we've gone on for an hour without disagreeing with each other at all.
Bring it.
I don't think we differ on much of what Ambassador does or means for the game. From the conversations we've had, the main disagreement is that Adam has said that you go for it 100% of the time or close to that. I've said you go for it 85% of the time. Those numbers don't mean anything, right?
Yes, they mean absolutely nothing.
However, what they do mean is that there is a significant difference between how often Adam and I would tell you to go for Ambassador.
Yeah, we can roll boards where Jake is over there I don't want Ambassador! And I'm like...
That sounds just like me.
Ambassador's really great, and I'm very smart, and I'm going to win this game.
Okay,
it's just like that.
It's just like that, but the thing is that I think that there are actually a significant number of boards where Ambassador can be skipped. I play a lot of games on ladder where I feel like I win for free because my opponent went for Ambassador when it was bad. Here's the thing about those boards where you can skip Ambassador. When Ambassador is bad, and it's not often, I want to stress that, but when it is bad, it's really bad. It's like you lose the game because you went for this bad. It's like you spend multiple turns accomplishing nothing bad. Now,
I disagree with everything Jake just said. First of all, he said he won a lot of games, and then he also just later said, oh, it's not bad very often. So which one is it?
Played a lot of games.
Yeah.
Got several accounts, and each of them have several thousand games. Anyway, go ahead.
Several thousand, wow.
Yeah, I've played millions of games of Dominion.
Wow, okay.
I've played hundreds of millions of games.
Wow.
Yeah, I've played at least a dozen games of Dominion in my time.
Yeah,
and
at least.
I have, when I say a lot, I mean a lot when you think about the crazy statement I'm making, which is that skip Ambassador. That feels like a lot because every game where you can skip Ambassador, it stands out in your mind. I just feel like I have more of those than the average person because I think that
you go for it more and your opponent doesn't punish you?
I don't, they punish me as much as they can. The thing is...
Yeah, that's Ambassador's fault.
That they punish me as much as they can because they get it to do as much as the Ambassador can do on that board. The thing is,
if I'm going for Ambassador and you're not, then a lot of what we said about being aggressive, about getting control of your deck, gets a lot less important for the record.
Okay.
If I see him not go for any sort of deck control, and I
That's
have an
not what I
Ambassador...
said. That's not what I said.
Right, but this is what I'm saying now. I see that hand of Ambassador, 3 coppers in an estate. I'm seriously considering just returning that estate now.
Sure. Yeah, this is... I mean, I will say that... I'll come back to that and say Ambassador is a high-skill card, and one of the marks of that is that the mirror plays differently than the non-mirror. Very much so. You have to be aware of what your opponent is doing and what their deck composition is and what's going to be weak to that. What they're going to be weak to. But, at the same point, it's terminal deck control. And sometimes, at a certain point in the game, there is a point where there's, a terminal payload card you'd rather play. Point number 2, when Ambassador can be weak. Ambassador is absolutely horrible for the hand that you play it from. Now,
oh, yeah, I remember. That was another thing you said that I really disagreed with. He says when Ambassador is bad, it's really, really bad.
Yeah, it's garbage.
No,
and what does that stem from? It's because the Ambassador is so bad for the thing that you're doing that turn. It is really good for, over the course of multiple turns, it's good for like deck control and the scope of things. But remember, you play the Ambassador and it uses up one card from your effective hand size. You reveal a card and return it. That's another card. Maybe you return 2. So you're down to a 2-card hand at that point. And like, that is as much an attack on yourself as it is for your opponent if...
Yeah, Chapel is just like
hang on,
yourself.
If the deck control isn't important. Because there's some other really powerful source of deck control. So, like, when there's some way to get control of your deck in spite of ignoring Ambassador, like, that is really... The Ambassador is so bad for your hand, like, you're just not accomplishing anything that turn when you play it. I think that Ambassador has its flaws, and people tend to ignore them because they have PTSD from the times they got snowballed. And that's valid. I understand. I have PTSD from certain kinds of Dominion boards myself. You know, there are times when I look at Minion and I just start banging my head on the table. But I think that you can really easily convince yourself that it's never good to skip Ambassador, and I think that Ambassador costs you so much to do that thinning and that junking. It costs it's asking so much. It's asking for 3 cards from your hand, or 2 at least, and it's asking for your terminal action, and that's a steep price to play.
So anyone can overbuild. You can always put too much importance on the number of cards in your deck. That's always true. That's not a problem that's unique to Ambassador.
No, it's not.
So, but this whole line of reasoning where you're talking about Ambassador attacks you just as much as the opponent, like that's what trashing cards do. It's pretty rare that you're gonna find a card that trashes in the early game for you and also lets you buy something that you can open with. That's not really.
This is true.
That's really hard to come by.
So,
if I'm gonna get a Chapel and that attacks my whole hand, like I'm not buying anything. Ambassador has, I mean, if there's synergies with lower cost cards, great. That's something Ambassador has over those. But also, if you think of Dominion as a zero-sum game, which I know is something that you really like,
game, yeah.
you can say I return 2, I junk 1, so like that's 3 cards worth of deck control I've gotten.
Sure,
not many things out there can compete with that. I mean, there's Chapel. That's not. I mean, you compare it to one of the most powerful things, but also it's doing a different thing because there's always that threat, right? So I can have a similar effect between Chapel and Ambassador. Chapel can do 4 cards worth of deck control by trashing 4 cards, and Ambassador can do 3. And both of those are big numbers. They'll both get me to the place I want to go super fast, and by the place I want to go, I mean that includes junking my opponent, which I assume they don't want. So, but the Ambassador it says attack on it. That's something that always needs to be played around.
I'll agree. I'll agree that even if you're skipping Ambassador, you play differently because it's there, and you also play differently because your opponent got it if they got it. I'm with you.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, when you say there's other thinning resources, other strong deck control resources. So like the 2 or 3 cards in the game that qualify there.
Well,
that still does not mean I'm ignoring Ambassador.
I'm not just saying it's Chapel or Donate or Ambassador. That's not.
Or Cathedral.
Or Cathedral. I'm saying that there are sometimes other, sometimes something even like Steward. And here's what I mean by that. Like, the reason you would skip Ambassador for these things is because there's some other thing you need to get to right away. Because there's some other priority that you need to get to really quickly. I told you that
over
Ambassador...
the idea of having any control over what cards are in your deck.
But the thing is, there are times when you could just get enough of a lead before that's the case that you win. The thing is that Ambassador excels at slowing down the game, but it's slowing down the game, and it's slowing it down for yourself. And, like, if your opponent can, like, power through that, you are just gonna fall behind. They're gonna run laps around you. When Ambassador is bad, and that's when there's some good trashing, and I'm talking about more than 1 card per shuffle, preferably, more than 1 card from your hands that you can choose what you're trashing, and there's some like really powerful payload to get to. Maybe you need to start playing discard attacks or trashing attacks on your opponent really quickly, like, and then you can start to snowball from there. Like, let's talk about another card that I know Adam's gonna love. Sea Hag. Let's talk about that.
Can I crap all over the point you just made? Real quick?
Yeah, I'll give you a minute.
I mean, all of this payload that you're talking about, like, if you go directly for it and then you get a bunch of crap in your deck, you're not going to have a good time. Like, thinning your deck helps you get to that payload. That's what Ambassador does.
If I've got, like, say, for example, Steward and I have Governor, I like skipping Ambassador in that situation because you're spending your time Ambassadoring me. I'm thinning... You know,
That's
keeping
a load
up,
of crap.
And I'm getting the...
Ambassador's just better for that deck than Steward is.
And I gotta go fast. And you're not going fast if you got the Ambassador in your deck.
I'm going just as fast as you, and I'm also junking you.
You're not hitting 5 anytime soon.
No, you're gonna hit... When you hit 5, you're gonna play your Steward and not trash cards to get hit 5?
It depends on what's going on. But... Possibly. I don't know. I have to...
So you're losing control of your deck at that point. Like, you can hit 5 and see your Governor every 4 turns because now you have a bunch of crap in your deck.
The thing is, like, I might... You're not gonna... And, like, the time when Ambassador is weak is almost always when there is no village or there is some kind of... there's some kind of really weak and unreliable village, if anything. And that's because...
Being able to play one Ambassador per turn steers me away from Ambassador.
Yes. So, like, in that situation that you're talking about, if you can maybe play multiple Ambassadors on me, then that's going to get me to the point, jumped fast enough where I can... Where, yeah, you're going to...
So you've required like 4 or 5 things in this kingdom, and now I'm thinking about skipping Ambassador.
Yeah, and I think that, but those things are flexible. Those things are flexible enough that the situation comes up that you.
So no village is required, and also another source of thinning is required.
I did not say no,
and also another payload.
You're saying things I didn't actually say.
Because if you take away any of those, like Ambassador is definitely what I want, and if you have all of them, I still want it.
So. Let's not, like, put words in my mouth here. I didn't say these things are required. I'm talking about the things that steer me away from it.
I'm saying that they're required.
And I'm saying he's wrong. Because I think that, like, the village is the biggest one.
Yes, every kingdom that comes up I'm wrong about. Okay.
That's another thing I didn't say. Like,
you just said that what I said is wrong.
I said what you said is wrong, but then you said every kingdom that comes up. I didn't say
Is that what you said?
You said that...
It's getting real! This is it! This is it! This is what you came here for!
Alright, so usually the situation where Ambassador is bad is because there's a lack of terminal space. That's usually what causes it, but that's not the only thing that causes it. Sometimes some other way to, like, rush game end before that deck control critical mass point. Where
Salt the Earth, man.
Salt the Earth is interesting because you try to rush to that, and that tends to be a weak enough strategy with a low enough point ceiling that the Ambassador deck could, like, pivot.
I'm not saying you go, like, straight for Salt the Earth.
Yeah.
I'm saying you can, like, give up on deck control, get, like, a province or 2, and salt the rest.
It's valid to talk about Salt the Earth in that context. It's a weird example, though. The biggest one for me would be Governor. Possibly, like, Tournament gets me there a little bit just because I want to get a province really quickly, and, like...
I won't speak to Tournament, but Governor doesn't have any effect on it.
Governor has a huge effect for me because Governor...
Oh, this is so good.
You gotta go fast in a Governor game, and Ambassador's not going fast. So, like, you think
Ambassador is not helping you go fast. Except it is, but it also slows your opponent down.
Unless it doesn't by enough. Like, it can... So here's the other point I wanted to make when I started talking about Sea Hag.
We
okay. Sea Hag's a really weak card, right? You call it.
Hey, Sea Hag.
Hey, Sea Hag.
How you doing?
It's pretty weak.
Hey there.
Yeah, so, like, we talked about Sea Hag is really weak, and this is where I wanted to get into what the role of junking is. So, like, we talked about how Sea Hag really only sees play when the role of the junking is to deny your opponent control forever. And that's not, you know, obviously Ambassador's role, but
that means you can't trash the purples, right?
Right. Yeah. So like, the idea is that the Sea Hag is pretty weak. It's not
sucks, man.
And it's not weak because there are only 10 curses. If there were infinity curses, I'd still usually not be going for Sea Hag. Because if there's some way to
trash
trash
it. Sound like a fun game.
No, right. But if there are infinity curses, and there's a way to trash those curses, I'm still usually ignoring Sea Hag. And why is that? It's because the Sea Hag costs a lot to play to do that junking.
It doesn't do anything.
It costs me. I have to buy it. It's a terminal action. All it's doing is junking my opponent.
Yeah, it doesn't help you.
Let's now come to the... And like, if that's the case, by the way, I don't care if you're giving me 10 curses. I don't care if you're giving me 40 curses.
55 curses?
56 curses.
Come on, man.
All right, I'll give him the 55 curses. I don't care if you're giving me 55 curses. Because each one you give me is putting you a little further behind, because it's costing you more to do it than it is for me to get rid of it and then keep building my deck. So, let's look at Ambassador when in the presence of other comparable deck control.
Yeah.
It starts to look a little bit like Sea Hag, because the only
definitely does not.
Now I'm not saying that Amb equals Sea Hag because the Amb is thinning and helping you play more Ambs. Sea Hag is never going to help you play more Sea Hags, but when there's other really strong deck control and the opportunity is that deck control instead of the Ambassador, then yeah, it's kind of all it's doing is junking.
It's definitely not.
It's bad at it.
It's definitely not all that's doing. Like what other cards are you going to play alongside your Ambassador in the same turn?
It depends.
It's going to take care of that thinning for you while you play your Ambassador for junking.
I mean, like,
what are those cards?
It depends. It depends on a lot. Maybe it's the tournament and the governor and the junk dealer.
Okay, so the tournament and the governor, they don't thin your deck.
They don't thin your deck, but if I have some way to
thin
my deck,
is amazing.
If I have some way to thin my deck and I have some priority to get to really quickly, the Ambassador is not going to get me there. These other things might.
So this
and if
priority
I can thin my
to get
deck
to really quickly.
If I can keep,
what does that look like? You said junk dealer, right? That was your example, right?
Junk dealer, yeah, it's a good thinner, yeah.
Cost 5.
Cost 5, right? I gotta get
then one card.
Yeah, and it's not a stop card, so it's yeah. So
you go get that junk dealer, man.
If you are not denying me control forever with the Ambassador, or rather, if I can keep you from denying me control forever, and I can progress toward whatever my win condition is on that board, then I'm making progress, and you're just failing to stop. That's
this
all
actually
it's doing.
Might be the core of like most of our disagreement on Ambassador.
Yeah?
You have this, it sounds like you have this, oh my god, are we going to find common ground? I did not sign up for this. It sounds like you have this metric.
Yeah.
Where like, if I can do all the things that Ambassador does, then I don't want Ambassador as a card I can open with that does all of this.
Sometimes, even if there's other resources that do everything Ambassador does, you still go for it. I'm talking about you can do the things that Ambassador does. You have the thinning to the point that you can keep your opponent from snowballing you with junk, and there's some other thing you need to get to, right? There's some other thing you need to get to that other cards are better at helping you do than the Ambassador is helping you do.
All of those things, right?
All of those things, but some of those things are vague enough that, like, they manifest in multiple different ways. Like, so it ends up being that I skip Ambassador, about 15% of the time.
15?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass, right?
Okay, well,
so,
that's not the only thing that's coming out of them. That was a good one.
That was. All right, I gotta
But, like, you can have this, you open with a card and it does all of those things for you at once.
Yeah,
Why do you not want that?
Because
it's so good.
The idea is that it's not the best way to do it.
It's the best way.
And sometimes it's not. Sometimes this combination of cards that's giving you those effects is giving you them in a more efficient way, or it's giving you, or it's.
I want to give my opponent junks. How can I do that faster than with Ambassador?
Well, do you want to give your opponent junks? That's the question. Like, you don't always. Sometimes
I do.
Sometimes
I do, Jake.
I mean, if you're going to give me that effect for free, if you're going to tell me like,
I'm willing to open with a card that does it.
And that's the question: is am I willing to do that over something else? Am I like? And the question is, what does that cost me? And
what's
sometimes
more
it sets
important
you behind
on
enough.
your opening buys than junking your opponent?
It depends.
Okay, trashing. Golly gee, if only we had a card that could do that I could open with.
Ambassador doesn't trash.
Oh my god.
Because it doesn't say trash.
Okay, we're not finding common ground. That was a close one.
All right, we almost started to agree for a second. So, okay, the other time I'd say Ambassador starts to look a little, and like, this is like, So one of these priorities that you might get to that start to weaken Ambassador, you alluded earlier in the episode when we were still harmonious, to like
Those were good times.
It really sucks when you get ghost shipped and you're trying to play Ambassador. Like if there's some discard attack, Ambassador has enough trouble getting to the point where it's playing Ambassador and still doing anything because like it's costing you 3 cards out of your hand. So like any discard attack can be one of those priorities to get to really quickly to start like playing it consistently.
Are you serious?
Yes.
That's
now like
that's more wrong than like a lot of the other wrong stuff you've said.
This is alongside the other really powerful deck control, right? So like, but like if you're playing a discard attack on your opponent's Ambassador deck and you're not falling behind in deck control. Like, they are just boned. They can't do anything.
No, they're not. They junk you and they in their deck.
I will stress
and then
here...
they play the discard attack.
But they're not gonna, because I'm way ahead. But
you're not, and they will.
I mean, I will stress that none of these things I've mentioned by themselves are a big blinking light that says don't go for Ambassador. There's nothing like that in the game. There's no one thing that tells me don't get Ambassador except maybe donate.
Not yet. In the next expansion, there will be a blinking card. And it's called Don't Go for Ambassador.
Yeah, it's literally what it's called.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, maybe donate. That's, like, the only thing that, like, I'd say, like, okay, about... Yeah, whatever. But, like, these are all factors that I've lined out that, like, push me toward not going for Ambassador. And those are Weak Village, other powerful trashing, some other priority like a discard attack or a rush to game end. And, like, if
I'm sorry,
some combination of these is going to push me away from Ambassador. And it's not always going to work out that way, but it is skippable more often than it gets credit for.
Okay, well, I'm sorry you had to listen to all that. If you just ignore everything that Jake said, there's probably some good advice still in the... Yeah.
I know you are, but what am I?
I'm rubber and you're glue. Whatever you say to me bounces off of me and sticks back to you.
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
You, man.
You too! Yeah, so... we got some kingdoms, and we were talking about a bunch of kingdoms right before this episode started, and we went through a billion of them, basically.
We went through 15 of them.
Yeah, it was so many. Yeah. And we were looking for ones where we would disagree on whether or not you went for Ambassador. Most of them we
found them, man.
Most of them we looked at them immediately and said, yeah, you go for Ambassador here. But
there were like 5 of them where we didn't agree, and then like one of them we had to like just... We need to stop arguing, save it for the podcast. We could have gone on, and that's this one.
Yeah, this is like the one that I looked at, and I was like, oh yeah, you skip Amp here. And you were like, oh no.
I thought about it, and I'm like, yes, I definitely want Ambassador.
He didn't think about it. He was just like immediately like, I'm opening double Ambassador.
I took a video
and I'm getting a third Ambassador.
You can watch the video.
And I'm just going to junk my opponent into oblivion with my Ambassadors.
So we have
That's what he said.
Fool's Gold.
Sorry,
Lighthouse.
You might want to start over. I was talking over you.
Chapel. Fool's Gold.
When you... okay, go ahead.
I'm going to kill you, man. We have Chapel. Fool's Gold. Lighthouse. Patrician. Ambassador. Lookout. Feodum. Junk Dealer. Tragic Hero. Grand Market. And that's it. Once again, for our audio-only listeners,
nice.
Chapel, Fool's Gold, Lighthouse, Patrician with Emporium, Ambassador, Lookout, Feodum, Junk Dealer, Tragic Hero, and finally, Grand Market. So yeah, there are factors here that do push me away from Ambassador.
Yeah,
Factor number 1, Lighthouse.
I was kidding earlier. Adam did give some thought to skipping Ambassador.
Ambassador War is definitely not the focus of what we're doing here.
No.
I still think I want to get it.
The question is Ambassador the...
Is it good enough
to
get?
Is it it's not obviously not the fastest trashing, but is it the fastest thinning in relation to your opponent's thinning? And
that's not really the question I ask myself.
Oh, well, then why would you settle on Ambassador?
Because I didn't ask myself. Anyway, Lighthouse pushes me away from Ambassador. The lack of a village or actually any draw pushes me away from Ambassador. And also chapels here. These things are making Ambassador look less good. On the other hand, you definitely do want a thin deck. You want to get some Grand Markets.
You probably are going for Fool's Golds at least early. At least I think you're getting them early.
It helps you get Grand Market for sure.
And you may be focusing on them later. I haven't really decided on that.
It depends.
I mean, I think you're getting Grand Markets first and foremost, but like...
you also want to make sure you get Lighthouse coverage.
And like Fool's Gold's money density is based on collision, so that pushes you toward thinning.
For sure, right.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to thin early. I mean, we both agree that's a priority.
Yes.
Fool's Gold is a great way to get to Grand Market. Lighthouse coverage is a priority.
Yeah. And
these are our goals, and I think that where we disagreed was how you get there, right?
Yeah. So, what's your open?
I'm opening with an Ambassador. I'm strongly considering a chapel with it. I also might get a Lighthouse. I should think about that. I actually haven't thought about it.
So while he's thinking
I want the chapel. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're looking at Am Chapel or Am Lighthouse. I am definitely opening with a chapel. What do I get alongside it? And it kind of...
I want the chapel.
I need to think about it, because if I see my opponent get an Ambassador, my second open is a Lookout. And this is where Adam's like, what the f*** are you talking about?
Yeah,
that's what he said. So, this is one of those situations where even if you do not go for Ambassador, that's not the same as ignoring it, because I certainly need to play differently if my opponent goes for the Ambassador.
Yeah, you get those Lighthouses a lot earlier.
Yeah. Lighthouses or just thin really aggressively.
Well,
probably
both.
Yeah, probably both.
Right, but I mean, if I wasn't getting Ambassadored, I'd probably be picking up Fool's Golds over Lighthouse.
Yeah. So, that's a thing. And honestly, I'll need to think about it, but am I skipping Lighthouse if my opponent goes Ambassador?
If you skip Lighthouse when I get my Ambassador, that is nuts and you will lose.
Possibly, but
definitely.
But here's the thing: I can also like just invest in like getting a junk dealer. Depends how quickly I hit 5. It depends on the price points I hit and when I hit them, and it also depends on what your deck composition looks like at the time. This is like not a plug and play board. I need to be reacting to the situation. So I am gonna be getting a chapel and probably a Lookout, and I am going to be getting Fool's Golds pretty early, and from there I'm just going to be focusing on getting Fool's Golds, thinning junk, and staying on top of the junk I'm getting rid of my starting cards, and then from there, depends on how hot and heavy the Ambassador junk has been coming in. I may need to keep a junk dealer in my deck, or I may be able to just start rushing Grand Markets. Either way, the Grand Markets are nice, and I may be going with Patrician Emporium. Patrician, I don't know, the plus buy means picking up extra Patricians. It's fine. It's not a stop card getting in the way of my Grand Markets.
Oh, it's draw!
Oh, it is draw, isn't it?
But it's not actually good, though.
It's not good.
Rip.
But really the Emporiums are like what I'm looking at. But yeah, in general, because, it's just more payload that's not a stop card. Which is really important, because, like, as I'm building here, I need to keep control of the number of stop cards I'm putting in my deck, especially if you're trying to junk me.
Yeah, you know what the best way to do that is? Lighthouse.
It might be. Like, I'm not... If I'm wrong about this and it turns out Lighthouse is necessary, like, I'm not going to be surprised. I'm going to try both in the build.
Right, so definitely Lighthouse is necessary.
We'll have to see. I mean, like...
I'll tell you that.
I think it depends.
You're welcome.
I think it depends on a few things. I could see myself skipping Lighthouse, because, like, I could get Fool's Gold instead and start hitting 5s and get a junk dealer earlier, and then get Grand Markets earlier, and blah, blah, blah.
It's funny, because, like, we agree pretty much on everything except for the fact that you want to get this Lookout, and I want to get an Ambassador. That's really the only place where we're disagreeing.
Yeah, would you say, like, the rest of the deck I described is pretty much exactly what you're doing?
Yeah, it's really not far. I'm not going to junk dealer either, but yeah, that's about it.
Well, if you're getting Ambassador, you're not getting a junk dealer, sure.
Well, even if you get an Ambassador, I'm not getting a junk dealer. I'm just going to get some Lighthouses. That's it. GG. The end.
Well, yeah, it depends on how much. The junk dealer is not something I'm planning on getting. It's something I'm planning on getting if I feel like I need it, because I've got the junk has been coming in hot and heavy.
Hot and heavy, man.
Hashtag hot and heavy.
Yeah.
So Grand Market split is probably important if the deck control ends up roughly even.
Well, there's Lighthouse, so it will.
Probably, yeah. So, like, at that point, Grand Market split seems really important.
Probably. Yeah.
I don't know about the Fool's Gold split.
I don't think the Fool's Golds are going to empty. But...
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, do you think the Fool's Golds are going to empty? Like,
no, I don't think so.
If Will-O-Wisp was here, they would, instead of Patrician.
Oh, rip.
Yeah, if only
Will-O-Wisp was a Kingdom card
fictional
that was in this
thing that I made up. Yeah. Okay, so...
Leave a comment in the comments section.
Yeah.
What would you do if Will-O-Wisp was here instead of a Kingdom card? Yeah, well, so it's pretty late. We've been at this for a while.
If Exorcist was here.
So we've been here for a while, and we're both feeling a little woozy.
Yeah.
Because of the mental pugilism here that we've been doing here. But yeah, let us know what you think. You can leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you are not, you can head on over to adamhorton.com.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Your next game you have Ambassador, skip it. See what happens.
Don't don't do that.
Just don't even think about it. Just don't get Ambassador. It's fine.
So anyway, you can go to adamhorton.com.
There's a 15% chance you're right.
And there's no, there's not. There's a forum there. There's our contact info and a link to our Discord server. All of these places you can get in contact with us. Let us know what you think about this kingdom. If you have questions for our Q&A episode, that's also kosher. And if you have just episode topics you want to hear, we got a couple of those this past week. They're on the list, man, and we're gonna get to it. I mean, I can't tell you the order. Because I don't know how much work this Q&A episode's going to be, or how, if it's going to be ready in time. But we listen to you. We're going to do those things. We want to hear from you. That's kind of the whole point of this. And let us know what you think about this. How wrong is Jake about Ambassador in general, and on this kingdom in particular?
We'll find out. Yeah. Next time on Making Luck, Pugilism Podcast.
The mini podcast. Raffle that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta figure out what's going on for that April Fool's episode, huh?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I think
there've been some real glimmers of amazingness, and I feel like if we can capture that.
Well, okay, so I think one thing we could do is outline a regular episode, take it totally seriously, and then just hand the outlines to them, and have them, go off our outlines, and just have them, deliver it as... And, have them, try to take it seriously themselves, too. Just, listen to them try to interpret our notes.
My wife will not be attempting to take it seriously.
Well, I'm just saying, because,
We're only going to get her to do this if we get her tipsy.
Nice.